Yeah, but with this episode, we're just going to talk about Stellaris. And we all...
Otherwise, we'll talk about Endless Space too. Why that's a good 4X game.
My God. Already getting off topic.
Is this a bit where you meant to say something dumb that goes at the beginning or the end?
Hey, welcome to Front Seat Gamer. This is a special episode. This week we've got three guests. I'm here, Blake's here, we've got Ryan, we've got Josiah, and we've got Carl. This episode is going to be about Stellaris, because we're all playing a massive game at the office. So, I'll start us off. I'm playing as the humans. I'm playing a culture called the United Nations of Earth, I think.
You're playing... I think default.
Yeah, it's the baby beginner faction.
Yeah.
Because I had played about like 2 hours before we did this multiplayer game, and I didn't really know what I was doing.
You did surprisingly well for only after 2 hours.
It
of playing.
looked that way. And we'll talk about that some more later. Blake, who are you playing as?
I'm playing as a Hivemind called Id, and I called myself Id because another guy at work is playing an identical race called Ego, and I thought it would be cool that we're like the same race, like the Id and the Ego.
Yep. I love that you started on opposite sides of the galaxy.
Yeah, it was on a complete opposite sides. Sides. And Ego was totally like overpowering everyone.
Ego is crushing everything right now. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm playing a Hivemind, so I basically am just one dude, and I don't have any like internal politics to worry about. I'm just taking over planets.
Yep.
Yeah.
Spreading like
a plague.
Giant disease.
Yeah.
Ryan, you're playing as...
I don't actually know what mine's called.
No, me neither.
You didn't specifically name them, or did you just...
No, I don't like to name.
You just like to roll the dice.
I just hit the random generator button until it doesn't look too bad.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, that's not the worst name in the world.
Okay.
And then I go with it.
So what's your faction all about?
Well, okay, so I'm fanatic, militarist, and spiritualist. And I'm currently in oligarchy, but now that my leader's immortal, I'm trying to move to imperial as quick as possible.
Oh, wow.
So that he never goes away, because he's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Interesting. But you could just get him elected again later.
They'll just keep costing me when I could just switch to imperial, and then it won't be a problem for me anymore, and that would be great.
True. Josiah.
So I'm playing as the Seer because I like making hard to pronounce names. Or I should say I used to be playing as the Seer, but have achieved their long-time goal of becoming immortal in a different way.
You're all robots at this point, right?
Yep. Yes. I have abandoned the flesh and made all of the various spiritualist empires, of which there are many, somewhat upset at me.
I noticed you, as you were spreading across the map.
If you can call it spreading.
Well, it was interesting because everyone else had basically just found... They sort of spread out from their center, and you created a series of dots across the galaxy.
Yeah, little pocket enclaves.
Yeah,
yes.
Which I thought was very interesting because I hadn't seen anybody else do that before.
Yeah. Definitely, like the whole strategic concern, because I'm one of the strange like wormhole drive species, and so the strategic concerns of defending my space are very different because I'm much faster to move into my own territory wherever it is, not so much across my own territory.
Right.
Yeah.
So this gives you a wider galactic reach, basically.
Yeah. So I've tried to like find locations that are significant to me for strategic or resource reasons, and then colonize there. Which costs me more influence, but also like gives me this kind of cool little speckle across the map.
Some of those points have ended up being now inside other people's empires.
I started out next to Blake and was quickly like just completely subsumed by the wave of Hivemind colonization.
There's also an enclave of yours inside Carl, I think, as well.
Yeah, that opened up a little trade zone.
Yeah.
Carl's giant orange blob has been slowly spreading across the outer perimeter of the galaxy. What's your faction all about?
All right, so I am new to Bet, which I even made a backstory for. Normally I play it in multiplayer games, horrific, militaristic, autocratic people, but now I am new to Bet with the idea that the Dalai Lama reincarnated off into some alien species to escape oppressive Earth.
As a giant snail, it turns out.
As a giant snail.
Oh, so cute.
And
what else
they're
could he have been? You know?
super peaceful, spiritual, with a exalted priesthood and like an agrarian culture. So I'm.
Well, snails got to eat leaves.
That's right. So
Gotta
we've
grow.
got farms and temples, and we're going all in on spiritual ascendance, which turns out to becoming psychic and meeting a thing called the shroud, which I managed to succeed in our second session, along with the other spiritual psychics in our one in our federation and one which is Rian.
Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
right.
So we actually have 3 psychic nations dotted across the map.
3 beacons of spirituality reaching out into the
shroud and
Into
pulling
the other
back military
side.
resources.
oh dear.
I'm going to give people a quick background on what Stellaris is, because they may be listening to this and going, what are they talking about? None of this makes sense to me. Stellaris is a 4X game. Think of it as Civilization in space played at real time, basically.
The
Does that
real time,
sound
I think,
about
is
right?
key to the enjoyment.
Yes.
Like playing like turn based is fun, but like you can just end up like waiting for people's turns can be annoying. But man, with real time, it's just nonstop, and you still get that just one more turn feel.
Right.
You're just like, I'll just wait till this research ends, and I'll just wait till like I do this, and then you still end up like staying up until like 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, there are enough bars slowly filling up that whenever you look, something's really close.
Yeah, there's always a bar
Yeah.
almost full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually, it's interesting that 4X games and idle games have a lot in common in that way. But well, that's for another time.
Yeah.
I do think it tries to skew way more to the simulation-y side than classic 4X strategy game. It's a little more random. It's a little more unfair, and
Yeah, very unfair.
But it doesn't really matter, and there's all these little role-playing and story hooks in it. And it does quite well. And like, definitely the night is dark and full of terrors. Like everywhere you go, suddenly, holy shit! I ran into something completely ridiculous and unfair. There's a 20,000 strong fleet and
Yeah.
mines at 1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's you often find something crazy. This is something I love about some of the games that have come out recently. Is there's a lot of great story moments that come out of it. Not that they are structured stories, but that you then have a story to tell later. Like, oh, I just saw 2 cultures fighting next to a black hole. I just stumbled across that, or something like that. And that's probably my favorite thing about Stellaris at the moment. Is just there's a ton of those.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's very, as Carl was saying, like super simmy, where there's just tons of stuff going on, and if you happen to look deep enough in any spot,
Right.
like, there'll usually be some crazy thing going on.
It's particularly pronounced that you guys had played a lot, and I had played about 2 hours, and I came into work the day that we started the big multiplayer game, and I said, so I did the tutorial last night, and I found some event where my Earth probes had been we had just gotten our faster than light travel, and my Earth probes that we had sent out in the 70s, we now realize had sensitive information that, should they fall into an enemy's hands, could prove like terrible. So I should go and try and catch up to the probes we
Retrieve
sent
that
out.
Voyager capsule.
That's funny. I don't know if I've ever
Right?
had that.
So-
Like,
You still haven't had it?
I don't remember ever having
If you
it.
play tons of games, well, you do though.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's random. You know, you can,
I reckon I've had it since we started that game. I've had it maybe like 4 or 5 times now.
Oh wow.
I for some reason tend to get pirates. Tend to get attacked by pirates.
Yeah, I often get like I'm constantly getting the birth of space piracy.
That happens in every game.
Yeah, I had assumed that was an every game
I
event.
still think
as
it
well.
happens in every
Oh,
game.
right.
We
It's
had
on
a
the same.
disagreement
It's on
about
the
this.
same layer.
But I reckon it's
we
in every game.
look and find out, but yeah.
But you can also get like you get the birth of space piracy, but then you can also find like an actual little pirate like stronghold that's like
Oh, yeah.
10K and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
There is a pirate chain as well, and that starts with you like blowing up one in your own system, and you have to hijack it and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And then it gives you like 6 different star systems across the galaxy where you go find more pirates.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Never
Oh,
finished that
is
one.
that's actually like the space cult pirates.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I've definitely only had a few games where I've had like pirates throughout my empire early on, and it's been a really horrific thing. And often games where I'm sure I've met pirates when I've been going around other places, but not.
But they're not a threat to me.
Yeah.
That's right. Whereas I've had ones where, like the first game we played at the office, my entire early game was trying to deal with pirates, and I don't know what anyone else was up to. I had this threat in my borders.
You generally get like the first like 100 to 200 fleet, and then there's a pirate military station and a star somewhere else. And I found that if you don't blow up that station immediately, it starts pumping out slightly bigger and bigger fleets that keep coming.
I've like cleaning up after, for instance, like certain hive minds that consume entire cultures. Like if the AI hadn't dealt with its pirates, I've sometimes run across like the last bastions of a civilization, which are basically some space pirates that are just growing larger in a little backwater system.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And
then you kill them. I guess.
In our giant multiplayer game, there's like what 10 players, something like that.
I think so.
I think we might have almost gone up to 12, but we were down to or down 3. Actually.
Yeah.
We've had some people drop in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
We've only played 2 sessions, so it's almost 8 hours of that single game.
Well, I think it is 9 hours because we went an hour over time.
We might post a screenshot of the galaxy map.
Yeah, the state of the galaxy.
Yeah, and so you can see what it looks like. But basically, right now, there are 2 federations, and in fact, we've got 2 members from each federation on the podcast. Carl and I are in one federation, alongside Chris H.
Yes, full of peace-loving, nice people.
We abhor war, but in real life, all 3 of us really want to go to war, and we can't. So we are bound by our ethics, basically. And then we've got Ryan and Blake both playing very aggressively militaristic.
Blake's definitely not as militaristic as the other members of his federation.
I don't know. He started more wars than me.
I think he's only done 1.
Nope. No, he definitely hasn't.
Oh,
ever since I joined the
sneaky.
Federation, I'm getting constantly bombarded with Blake wants to go to war with this guy.
Right.
But that's just me destroying little people that don't affect the
I think that counts.
larger galactic.
You started off quite isolated, I think.
I was quite close to Josiah. I was almost right next to Josiah.
We actually have home systems that are a very short distance apart.
Yeah.
So we were first contact, and it was quite tense. Like the story of our diplomatic relationship is an interesting one.
Tell it for me.
Oh, right. So I am, or I was decided, like I'm a technocracy, decidedly focused on being small, didn't want to colonize additional planets, but wanted space-based resources and exploration to be happening.
And you're aggressively pursuing science.
Science. Whereas Blake, on the other hand, essentially discarded science as important and wanted to expand as far as possible to just get the hive into as many places as possible and just have a huge presence on the galactic stage, which he can then develop later into like a more powerful empire.
Right.
But very land grabby at first.
Yeah, very, very land grabby.
Yeah.
So much so because your research speed slows down depending on how much population you have.
And how many in each planet as well also slaps you with
And
another.
so I had these like spurts of massive land grabs. And so my research was just basically ground to a halt, where it was taking like over 100 months for like every single research. And I mean, what does 100 months translate into for
That's
in
probably
like
like
real
10 or
time?
20 minutes, right?
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, like a long time for something to finish, and then also compared to like everybody else is probably researching in 12 to 30 months. So like you're 3 or 10 times as slow as
so I
as
was
other people.
kind of like technologically stagnant.
Yeah, you were
Basically cavemen that are slowly creeping across.
Yeah,
the
we're
universe.
just
it was basically like the hive doesn't use technology. It just like jumbles together some janky.
I was running on the
ships.
lowest the lowest ships for like the longest time.
Right.
And just got so massive that I was like, right, in this game the last game we played, I spent the entire time just restructuring internally until I was like actually up and running like a normal empire.
But yeah, so the friction between us was pretty immense, and if I had been slower, I might have felt quite trapped. But I was able to set up some enclaves in places that I felt was important.
Yeah.
And then watch as Blake's like massive population pressure started to just push my borders in towards the places that I actually had.
Which
people
actually
living.
forced you to take a military tradition.
Yes, I eventually like picked up a little bit of border range just to buffer that, and used like as you were saying earlier, my little pop-up
create little pockets of
spaces.
civilization all throughout the galaxy.
Yeah, so I decided to distribute a little bit more, and because we're both quite diplomatic, we didn't end up getting into hostilities, but we easily could have if something like critical to one or the other.
Well,
had
I
been
strongly
occupied.
suspect that Blake, being technologically, for lack of a better word, dumb, meant that like if he had tried to go to war with you, you would have basically been able to hold your ground, and he would have been throwing resources at the wall, and
It would have slowed both of us down quite a lot.
Yeah,
and neither of us wanted that.
Right. It would be a Pyrrhic victory for one of you.
Yeah, and I think I mean like if there had been something that was critically strategically important, like there were ruins of an ancient megastructure that I secured.
Oh yeah,
and
you
a
nabbed
couple
them.
of, a couple of very very nice research spots. And if I hadn't been able to secure them, I definitely would have considered like a quick war to just like remove a colony or two just to get like some breathing room.
But the thing is, like, I go into these games with kind of multiplayer games with the same strategy of like I'm gonna befriend my neighbor because
and you did.
I
yeah.
just think it's like beneficial for both people to not be fighting early on because it just weakens both of them. And then when they discover a larger civilization that hasn't been at war constantly, they just come in and like waste both of them.
Well, last night, a similar strategy, Carl was discussing something along these lines, where basically he wanted civilizations not in his federation, but nearby to be healthy because they acted as a buffer, basically, right?
Yes, that was definitely my plan.
So, like, had you considered, for example, sending resources to neighboring factions to make sure that they could, withstand the flood of ego?
I'd considered it, but at that time I was pretty greedy for my own resources.
Okay.
And particularly up in the north was getting so large, I just went, my peace-loving people suddenly need a fleet. And I suddenly went, yes, battleships and corvettes, we're going to build all of those.
And your neighbor directly above you, I think the Huffness?
Technocracy of Hifness.
Yes.
Huffness.
I hadn't expected them to fall so quickly.
No,
though.
they were quite large, and they were kind of a major power for a while. I think they were AI controlled.
They were AI controlled.
They are, but there was a small matter of like of the Numerian independence. They were integrating a vassal, which was one of our players who joined in progress.
They settled one of my planets.
Yes,
jerks.
But Hifness had them as a protectorate and then as a vassal, and immediately started integrating them. But we had a player sub into that, and I guaranteed their independence and fought that war of independence for them.
Right.
And whacked the Hifness fleet.
Had some detrimental effects on Hifness's ability to defend itself against ego.
So as a result of you basically ensuring that one of our newer players had a faction to actually enter into, caused another faction to collapse. The might of ego.
Which was my buffer.
It was irresponsible of me, definitely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about ego, because this is the big faction that we are all kind of afraid of.
So Ego started off as a player in our first game.
Yes.
And he was unable to join in our second game. And so an AI just took over.
Yeah.
And holy crap, man, that AI
Did extremely well.
Yeah, did so well. It's actually frightening for everyone, basically.
He was my north border neighbor from basically the start. I think I think I surveyed 2 stars before I found him. And I was immediately like, okay, well, this isn't great, because I knew it's someone at work called Mike, and he loves to talk about how aggressive he's going to be in these games. So we all knew he was going to be aggressively expanding and aggressively attacking.
He's done that to his detriment too in past games, because the first Office game we played, he talked about how he was going to purge everyone, how he's super militaristic, going to just take out everyone, and me and Carl just banded together and like smashed them.
That's true, we did.
Yeah,
And I was playing a little militaristic myself, but we managed to make friends instead of enemies.
yeah. Well, again, we started right next to each other.
And we
and I
were
wanted
going to go to
be
war
friends.
until we said we must make peace.
There was a real Cold War land grab happening early on.
I think
in that
we've
game.
also played with too big a map. We didn't know how big a map we should play with
Yeah,
10
we should've been a
people.
little smaller.
And that turned out to leave a lot of space. And while,
And it's pretty much all ego now.
yeah, and those of us who are playing like
The
insular
excess.
peaceful empires just went, oh yeah, we'll just let these things go. And the ego just took all the
Yep.
space that was spare.
Yeah.
I personally don't think that ego is as impressive as it looks.
No,
Oh, yes. A corrupt institution, rotten within, and
Yeah,
and
it's
just
a
ready
very
to
very
collapse.
big area
yeah.
that his little his empire border makes, but he has the same number of planets as Blake does.
Yeah, well, we decided to take out its fleet. Our Federation was going to go to war with Ego and take out its fleet. However, we're all peace-loving. We ended up with someone who was human and now an AI,
In the Federation,
and a Federation. And the bureaucracy of us going to war got too hard. Like, literally, we've got Chris H trying to work out our war goals, and this is a quirk of the game that you've got to work out your goals for going to war. And if you're in a federation, everyone's got to agree to it. And then we were trying to find an agreement where
that the AI would accept.
AI would
basically.
accept. And we tried this twice, and it took like a good 20 minutes out of our evening.
Yep.
And-
We're still not at war.
And our federation's acting like the United Nations trying to make an important decision.
It's
And we've
fantastic.
actually failed to go to war twice, despite the fact we're sitting there with our fleets going, if we all
We're
band...
pretty sure they have weapons of mass
And they-
destruction.
well,
we
I mean-
just need to find the evidence.
They are,
thing is,
they're
no, you-
actually committing genocide. Yeah.
The thing is, you can clearly see their giant fleets on their borders, just kind of
Yeah.
like patrolling around near Nick, and it's like it's obvious that
It's got Nick
Truly
rivaled and
terrifying.
everything.
Yeah,
it's
it's like-
like I want to eat you.
it's quite clear what their intentions
Yeah.
are.
My fleet is what, maybe 17k power, and
Yeah.
his is 62k. So he's got 4 times the size of my fleet, just sitting there
Yep.
staring at me.
We worked out when we had the
Hungrily.
Federation fleet, which is our combined Federation fleet, above 20k.
Yeah.
And I've got it now about 20k, and this psychic avatar thing, which
Oh my
apparently
God.
is worth about 20k.
What is that?
well,
I've
it
never
is
seen
like,
that
it hasn't
before.
got a number, it's just got a skull on it.
Oh
like-
my god!
It's got a great deal of offensive power, but it's like it's got special properties, like as you would expect from a psychic thing. It has
Yeah.
like no health and all shields, which
Oh,
is
okay.
interesting.
Yeah. So if you know that
For some
But
reasons.
can you because with most enemy fleets, you can inspect them when you have like sensor range on them. Can you do that to that thing?
I'm not sure if it's
You
modules show up.
can't see what it's made up of.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So you just
can't inspect the ship.
you just have to fight them before to
Guess.
see what
Yeah.
effect it has.
And I know less about it than Josiah, because I've never done the psychic train at all. And
I've seen some Empires go psychic before, and it's a cool thing actually, because it's kind of different from the way you would normally design a ship. But I'm not exactly sure if somebody would build a fleet to counter psychic avatars, because they're not very numerous.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you know that there's one or more in the universe, and you know that they're, like for example, our Federation, which has 4 members, half of them are psychic.
Right. Yeah. So they might.
There is the potential for 2 of these just in our Federation floating around, and so an enemy Federation might go, oh well, maybe I can build something against.
Yeah.
this.
Need a Psy Hunter fleet. Or
I would be
something.
very surprised if we had another one
Why?
in the game, just by the number of different things that can happen in the shroud, and the fact that the Carl getting it wasn't guaranteed. Like him getting the option and it rolling the chance of him getting it wasn't.
Yeah, that's
guaranteed.
right. There's
we should
I've-
explain the shroud, because this sounds
Yeah, you should.
mystical.
So-
Because it is.
Because the thing is, I'm not even exactly sure what the shroud is.
So there is this psychic in the game. There are a lot of story paths, and one of them is quite difficult. If you start as a spiritual empire, you can choose some options and end up with having psychic powers, and you use your ascension perks, which are like huge investment. Like they're basically like keystones.
Keystones or capstone. Like they're the primary thing you're going for when you're going through your Unity.
And you need 2 of them to become Like
Really? Just two?
You need
To start.
two different ascendancy perks to do it.
Oh
You
yes,
need
sorry.
at least 3 already selected for
yeah, so-
So your third one is the third ascendancy you take is the first point, and then the fourth one you
Yeah.
can take as transcendence.
There
Ah.
are several ways you can do it, but it requires 2 of your perks, and you must have 4 total perks in order to actually ascend.
And then once you have ascended, every so often you can, as well as getting a whole bunch of other benefits and techs and special stuff, you can go into this, contact the shroud in some mass civilization seance. And
Yeah, actually, that's pretty
and then basically get to draw out of a goodie bag and get a thing, and it gives you like 3 choices, and you've got different odds of getting them.
Right.
And the avatar was like small odds to get it, and I picked it and got it, and then suddenly I've got this
that's a nice
horrific
payoff.
looking
Now you've
skull.
got a giant
Ooh.
avatar.
Yeah.
Now, is this a one-off thing, or is this a like now every X years you can do
60
this?
months.
Every 5 years you get to reach into the shroud and get a beanie, a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Maybe.
so is that the only type of event that you have been offered?
So I managed to get all my fleets with evasion, and wow, I think I've done this 3 times, and I failed to get something once.
Have any of them been? Have you met any like larger entities in there?
Other than my avatar, no, but I'm told you can.
Yeah. So there's that type of shroud event, which is just like a nice bonus but kind of random, and then there are other ones.
Right. Oh, and my
also.
favorite one, the Blorg, who have actually been in a game we've
Oh,
played
right.
previously.
Yeah,
Blorg is awesome.
One of my bits of text was seeing the Blorg talking and stealing one of their like super weird technologies.
This is one of our hyper advanced fallen empires
Yes.
that are just stagnantly sitting in
Yeah.
the corners of the
so
galaxy.
I'll just quickly explain what those are. Basically, you've got this galaxy. You're not the only intelligent culture. Obviously, there are other players, but then there are also there are these AI players that, thematically speaking, have been there for billions of years before you, and so they have hit the technological limits. They've got huge armies, and they're extremely powerful. And they either won't talk to you or acknowledge you, or will basically sort of look down upon you and pity you occasionally.
And they also take up very little space on the
Yes,
map.
they don't spread out.
Yeah.
There are quite a few flavors of them as well. Like,
Okay.
there are ones that will just straight up ignore you because they're too good for you.
Yeah.
And there are other ones that also think that like they know what's best for the galaxy, and they'll start trying to force you to do things that you potentially don't want to do.
yeah.
And because you don't want to make them mad, you potentially just have to say yes to whatever they tell you to do, and that can
Right.
drastically change how you end up running your empire.
In my very first game at home, I built a border outpost, frontier outpost, and it sort of hit the limits of Fallen Empire's territory. And I didn't realize this at the time, and they immediately went to war.
Yeah.
Immediately destroyed my all of my things.
That's also a thing as well. Like they have their clear empire, but they also have space around it that they consider like theirs.
Their territory.
And
Yeah.
if you colonize planets or put anything in there, there's a chance they'll go to war with you to take them off you.
Yeah, that's like the specific because as Ryan was saying, there are flavors of Fallen Empire.
Yeah, that's true.
the xenophobe one has a bubble, and if you come inside the bubble, that's what
Yeah.
makes them mad.
Yeah.
But like the spiritualists are more like it's not so much being close to them; it's doing things that they don't like.
Right.
That'll make them mad.
Right.
So, for instance, I'm on really thin ice with our spiritualist Fallen Empire because they think that I'm soulless automatons.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm the same people, just robots now. But they have a different view.
Just digital.
Yeah.
that old digital soul.
Yeah, the destruction of my corporeal meat bag minds is basically irrelevant. We're the same minds, definitely not slightly different.
So
we
anyway,
didn't all die.
we've got the Blorg in our universe, and they're kind of friendly to me.
I think their thing is that they're incredibly ugly, but
there's
but they
xenophilic.
love everyone.
Yeah,
They've just started giving out. They gave me some minerals and energy, and then they gave me a technology.
They're the most peaceful,
Super
loving
nice. Love the
everyone.
Blorg.
They're just hideous.
Are they the ones that take your population? Because someone
They
Yes.
did. Yeah.
yeah, they wanted my population for a zoo, and it was like
yeah, they're concerned that you might get
You should say yes.
genocided by ego.
I did say yes.
So they want to preserve a member of your
Yeah.
But that was actually inconvenient because they took someone who'd just gone to a new consecrated colony
Oh,
of
no.
mine
Oh, what? And they took your only pop off a
No,
colony?
no, it was one of like 2 or 3. But,
That's a bummer.
but basically, whenever I go take a new world, we consecrate it with because one of my ascendancy perks is consecrating worlds, and it becomes a holy place, and
All right.
goes.
Oh, and it decolonized it.
And it almost decolonized.
Oh, okay.
it.
Well, lucky he didn't take a leader, because I've had ones where they take my leaders away from me.
Oh wow!
I've had ones like that as well, where they're like, "Hey, this scientist, he's really a genius, and he's limited by your limiting technology. He should come to us, and like he can do so much more."
Is that a thing the materialists, the
I
materialists?
think so. Yeah, I don't know what.
The keepers of knowledge ones.
Yeah, I think that might have been.
I haven't
one
run
of
into
those
them as
ones.
much as I'd like. They seem fun.
Yeah.
So, one thing I think with our second session, we played a session like it was a month ago now, which was the early game, which is what we'd been doing in our one-off sessions, which has in Stellaris has this nice rhythm. You have rising tension as you go out, and then you meet the other empires, and you have this sort of downbeat of nervousness, and then you find out whether you're at war or not. I think the mid game, which was weird, we all had things to do, but it can get very static.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at now, right?
Yep.
Like
Yeah, very
we've got
static.
2 federations, and Josiah's his own.
Yeah, the neutral observers.
Yeah, he's yeah.
You know,
And
just-
you get this detente between these big federations, and no one can afford to go to war. And we need we almost had a Ferdinand assassination moment with Jake's empire.
right. Yeah. It could have easily been like a bunch of galactic support for independence, but yeah, there's not a lot of independent actors because so I was expecting that Rian would hopefully stay independent, but joining the vast hive mind.
I thought he was going to take out Nikolai's devouring swarm, because
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
one of the other nasty hive minds out there, is a devouring swarm.
Well, part of the reason I
Tell
joined
us your
the Federation
secrets.
is that I can see everything that Blake and Nikolai are doing now.
Right.
Oh,
I mean,
the intelligence.
That goes both
yeah.
ways. Like I can see everything you're
Yeah,
doing.
Isn't
but the difference was that I was quite happy with what I saw.
So how did
okay.
Nikolai join the Federation if he's a devouring swarm?
Oh, he switched out.
Yeah, so
Oh.
it turns
Yeah.
out hive minds can go into phases of being horrifying murder machines and then stop.
So we're not the Tyranids anymore. We've evolved.
We evolved some different stuff.
Yeah, but we can devolve at any moment.
So,
Yeah.
and then because the Stellaris seems to have 3 acts, our next session we should have some horrible in-game threats occur.
Yes.
And
yeah.
that-
So
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to explain what?
Yeah,
that
because
is?
I still haven't had that happen.
Okay, so after a number of years, and it can accelerate based on events in the galaxy, you can have 1 or more in-game crises
Yep.
happen. And these are basically involve outside incursions from horrific threats,
Yep.
and or fallen empires deciding to wake up and throw their weight around.
Yeah.
I don't think those are the same.
No. Yeah. They're not the same, but they can both happen.
So you,
Yes.
can, only have, you
Simultaneously.
can only have one in-game crisis.
Yep.
Which
and
is the external
awakened empires are not part of that.
No, but they're an in-game thing that happens,
And
and
they
they
often-
feel pretty crisisy to
Yeah,
me.
They
yeah.
often interact. Like sometimes a fallen empire will awaken because it feels like the galaxy is going to get eaten.
Yeah.
And it'll be, it'll defend you. But
So-
sometimes they are the problem.
To give an example of one of the in-game crises, you get these extra-dimensional things come through, and then you find out they're out there to spoilers for people. So if you want to play and you don't want to know about this, stop listening.
Yep.
Then when they attack a planet, they eat the planet, and like the planet's gone from the universe,
Wow.
and they keep coming through these wormholes.
Yep.
And that one gets interesting because if you leave them, if you can't deal with them, then more start coming through in different places.
Well, actually, yeah, and they split into 3 factions and start fighting each other.
See, I didn't know that because
planets.
I only saw 2 factions because I managed to deal with them when the second one came
Wow,
out.
I've
of one
never
of my
seen
games.
more than.
It's if you're
One.
losing. If you're losing, it gets more interesting by
Wow.
splitting into like a
And they
civil war.
fight each other. It gets
Yeah.
super weird.
Oh wow,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
great.
I like the. There's sometimes a weird sort of balance with that when an in-game crisis shows up, especially when it's in somebody else's
It's
territory.
real convenient when it eats them.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
then you're like,
consider
oh
that
yeah, this
convenient.
this is great. They're like dealing with an enemy of mine and making them weaker, but they themselves are getting stronger and stronger, and now they become a massive enemy that you have to deal with yourself.
Yeah.
Yep. But in our massive multiplayer game, there's some potential for galactic cooperation there.
or
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
Or not,
Or
depending
not.
on where it is. Like,
So which should break the current detente
For
once
sure,
stuff starts
yeah.
happening like that.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, does one federation attack the other in like a mad self-destruct? Well,
There is a sort
Yeah.
of kingmaker scenario that happens
Yeah,
when there's like two giant federations and I guess a third threat enters, right?
right.
Someone's gonna lose.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Or we could band together and save the galaxy because we've been pretty nice so far.
yeah. It's we're actually a fairly chill galaxy in this iteration. We might get some because I think it's Urine and Mike and occasionally Nikolai are probably the most unreasonable
well,
empires.
Nikolai did not want Ryan in the Federation because he's like, he's not one of us. He's not a hive mind.
He doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Oh, so your federation, the federations get an automated name, and
You can rename it though.
you can, but the automatic names are cool. And the one which started off as just two hive minds was called Great Minds Think Alike.
Yep.
Well, that was a custom name though.
Yeah, that's a
Oh,
custom
was it?
name.
I thought that was an
custom made it.
automatic one.
No,
that was
no.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the names we've had for factions have been really good as well. I think Chris H has had the best names in my opinion so far.
Yeah.
He's playing a faction
Oh,
called
yeah,
the
yeah.
Good Boys,
Yes.
and they're all
Good
dog
Boys.
themed.
It's funny because people that are not playing when we're staying late will come over to my desk and be like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And I'll show them around the galaxy. This is Nikolai. This is Ryan. This is thing. And then they always go, "The faction of Good Boys." Like, who's this?
And we had a second game that we started a couple weeks ago because too few people from the current game could make it, and in that he became Pack and Slave,
Oh,
which was
my
a
God.
slave driving faction
Yep.
based on the Pack and Save retail like
Supermarket.
grocery chain
Yeah,
here in New Zealand.
which is referred to as that because of their like relatively low minimum wage for
Yeah.
our country.
And I love that he named each of his planets after an isle in Pack and Slave.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
fantastic!
Oh, man, that
I
was
didn't.
great.
I wasn't around long enough in that
So
game to
good.
see it. That was
yeah.
great.
You got wiped out so
Yeah,
fast.
yeah. I got wiped out because like I was trying to play a different sort of play style that I wasn't like 100% sure of, and just sort of
really
watched it at
wobbly
the
in the
start.
early game.
That was
Okay.
a very odd. We decided, as it was a one-off, we'd just small empire, everyone go militaristic and expand, and five of us ended up on one side of the galaxy.
Yes.
And then,
And then
Blake,
Blake.
in on the other side with all the AI.
Yeah, I had xenophobe. Xenophobe empire above me, xenophobe empire below me, and to the side, a fallen empire that was a xenophobe.
Yeah. I was on the other side of that, and I was like, man, it'd be nice to go and like make contact with Blake. Oh nope, not
Yeah.
gonna, nope,
Yep.
never
And
gonna
whereas
happen.
on the other side, I decided to go super militaristic rush.
Oh yes.
And I rushed out and attacked Nikolai pretty much as soon as I was able.
Right. There was some interesting stories that came out of that because you tributized a whole
I
bunch of people.
tributized
Oh my
three of the
gosh.
players.
Yeah. And started on the fourth.
Yes, I was trying to I tributed three people, and then
And-
was
and-
trying
and-
to get Josiah as well.
And when you tributize someone, what does that mean?
It means you get 25% of their minerals and their energy. And because we were going super aggressive, I didn't spend that on improving my own economy.
Right.
I used that to fund my next war.
Right. You were fueling your military
That's
on
right.
the backs of of your tributes.
So once I'd got three of them, I thought, well, now I've got to take the fourth out.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I sort of stalled, and I didn't quite, because
Yeah. some
Josiah had built up a bit
very
before I had
desperate
him.
knife fighting.
Yes, and I almost got him, but then I
We were at war for like 30 years or something like
yeah,
that.
and then
Yeah.
all of them banded together, and because my economy was solely based on tribute,
On them, yeah, it was. You actually had a lot of very strong economic tributaries, and as soon as they declared their mass insurrection, it
Yes.
was just like, oh,
Your
God.
economy fell apart. And interestingly, at least I had been really trying to stabilize my economy because 25% of your resources are being drained, so you have to build a lot more just to maintain costs. And so as soon as I broke away as a tribute, my economy skyrocketed, and suddenly like I was back in the game.
Can do anything you
and
want.
Nikolai was back in the game, and I think Chris H was there as well. And
Yes,
so we were
yes.
all suddenly going really well, and Carl, who was so aggressive at the start, found himself like in a bit of trouble.
yeah, I decided I got to be my own in-game crisis right at the beginning.
Yes. It was interesting though. Yeah.
Let's talk about starting strategies because I mean, it seems like everybody has a little bit of a different starting strategy. In the first game that we played, the big multiplayer game, I didn't realize that by taking a planet, you expanded your borders. I had assumed that you had to expand your borders to claim a planet.
Right. Yeah.
So I was putting frontier outposts, basically marking out my territory, and then I was going to backfill, which was like a terrible idea because it's
actually
ruined my economy.
It's a pretty good idea, and it works, but it's only if you particularly like me in that first game are very shy of the additional technology and Unity costs from having more population.
Right.
And if you're not, then yeah, planets are amazing.
I mean, it also works if you don't overextend your influence spending on
Yes. Because you get building frontier outposts has a cost.
Yeah,
we
it
should
has a
briefly
cost.
discuss the influence economy, because this is one of my favorite bits about the game.
Yeah, and you've got some good thoughts on.
So in the game, there's a bunch of resources like most games, but there's influence. And influence to do anything that matters on the board as such, like if you want a planet or you want to claim some space with the frontier outpost, it all costs influence and changing your faction and
hiring leaders.
All this things cost it. So stuff that actually affects the game and strategic decisions cost influence. And you get influence from a variety of things, but it's mostly by doing things that act like the empire you made at the beginning. So if you make a warlike empire, you want to declare all your neighbors as rivals, which is normally a bad idea because then you're at each other's throats, but it gives you influence so you can affect the board better. And if you're like really political or peaceful, or you've got lots of political factions, you want to make those factions happy, and that gives you influence. So this has this built-in economy where to do things on the board, you basically have to role play the empire you made at the beginning. And it works remarkably well. When you try game it, you do the right kind of things.
This is true. Though you can kind of screw yourself by if you don't realize that some things have an influence upkeep, or that some things can actually detract from your influence, such as like accidentally pissing off one of your factions.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Then you can be in trouble because it really hinders your ability to then fix that problem.
Yeah, you have to, like, it feels really bad, and for some players maybe they would never do it, but you have to dismantle some of those frontier outposts that you're running, and you have to work really hard to make this obnoxious faction happy. And
and that's what I found myself doing last night, because I had all these frontier outposts and I had very little influence, and I just had to start dismantling them.
Right. But at that point, you'd realize that you could colonize planets.
Yes. So I started reclaiming my borders, and then I backfilled, and then I took down the frontier outpost. My borders didn't change too much. But I mean, like, your starting strategy, Blake, you were talking about in that game where you wanted to try something new.
Yeah.
What happened?
So in that particular game, basically I just wanted to try and do what Josiah does. And focus inwardly, be small, instead of being a hive mind and being giant. Be small and very tech focused, and like micromanage my planets instead of because you can put planets into sectors within your empire, and then the AI sort of just manages that for you.
Yeah, and you don't get as many resources.
Yeah, you don't get as many resources for it. So I was trying to like focus on just a few small planets, and not really worrying about colonizing out. And I didn't worry about it. So like I didn't worry about it to my detriment, because I kind of just watched as other empires took planets around me.
Right.
You know.
Right. Yeah.
And because there were xenophobes.
Yeah.
You couldn't then expand.
And then I'm just like, well, I have nowhere left to expand to, and I like not really doing a good job of micromanaging these planets anyway, because it's the first attempt of me to do it. So anyway, I kind of committed suicide in that game. By there was a one of the empires really close to me, clearly hated me and was very close to going to war with me. So I just went to war with them, and then flew into their sector and saw that they had like 3 times as many ships as me. And I just fought them and was like, you know what? I just give up.
All right.
Yeah, you were not the happiest camper after that.
I was like, oh man, it's because it's such a bummer. It was only like an hour
Yeah,
after.
especially because those games really will go on for like 10, 12 hours plus.
And I came over to your guys' side after me just trying to like build up my little like planets and putting like upgrades, and my research was going way faster than in previous games. So I had lots of upgrades to buildings to do, but I wasn't putting the money into frontier outposts or fleets, colony ships or fleets. And then, so coming over to your guys' side and seeing like these huge galactic space opera that's happening was like, man, I had a bummer of a game in that one. Yeah. You guys are having so much fun over there.
Yeah, we were like, after the fact, I was unfortunately like busy trying not to get wiped out by Carl.
Yeah.
But, I think because you can join in progress in Stellaris, you probably should have like hopped into an AI empire.
I think I was so
demoralized
that I'm just like, I can't do it.
Oh.
That's fair.
But the thing is, like that weekend, I came back home and recreated that empire in a single player,
right?
And did a few like practice runs and
to play it.
Yeah, and sort of learned to play that kind of play style. And I then took that micromanaging and like specializing planets and looking for the planets that have bonuses on, took that into the game we just continued with the Hivemind and like drastically improved the running of that Hivemind.
Yeah, Blake went from being this super technologically backwards land grab to actually catching right up to par with everybody else in one session.
So you're saying we should have hit you? And
you should have hit me, yeah. When I only had like Corvettes. Still.
Yeah, Blake was very hittable at the start of the session.
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Right.
I was big, but like very soft.
It would take us like 4 hours to sit down in a range going to war.
Yeah. But again, like credit to Blake's diplomacy, he managed to offer me enough like resource incentives and diplomatic incentives to actually get me to help with technology. So we actually made him a protectorate for the first half of the session. So he was both militarily protected and getting this 90% tech speed boost.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But it only took a few minutes for me to catch up. Or not so catch up, become the next
took
state,
like
which is a vassal.
An hour and a half before we had to dissolve that because you'd torn through. It was, I mean,
no,
it was a little while.
It was only like I felt like it was so
just
fast.
like 30 minutes.
Yeah,
yeah.
Well, I mean, in that game, all I was really doing was like managing stuff, so time was just meaningless to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was fast. It was like shockingly fast, but I think it still took like a decent little.
We were busy being inwardly focused and being terrified of ego.
Yep. Yeah, he's huge now. Now, Ryan, you in the current game, the one we were playing last night, if I recall correctly, early on, I think you claimed about 3 different cultures.
2.
2. Okay.
So, I guess surprisingly, like the way that was only my second game as well. I didn't play very much, but the way I ended up playing that game actually ended up being my go-to strategy for starting new games, which is I like to start down the prosperity tree initially and rapidly expand out to about 3 planets, and then stay there and just fortify my spaceports and put as much effort into that territory as I can, and then I make about 2 or 3 science ships, find my 2 closest neighbors, and immediately crush them.
See, that's the most opposite of what I do with neighbors.
Yeah, so that's why first 3 planets, get some spaceports, get some good income, and go over your naval capacity by about 10-20%.
Wow.
Then while your neighbors are just starting to put their first 2 planets out, they don't have any spaceports, you send your sizable Corvette army, and you take them out. And then once they're your tributaries, you'll basically become a game where you suppress them every 10 years by humiliating them.
That's what I didn't do against
Right.
my human opponents. Harder to do versus humans.
Yeah. It's a very quick war to humiliate them. It's only 10 war score, which doesn't take very long. You gain 100 influence, so it can negate any negative influence gains that you're getting, as well as reducing their influence gain for the next 10 years,
Right.
which prevents their ability to expand. You also get the opportunity to wipe out their fleet every 10 years, which is very terrible for their economies. And you just basically use them to prop you up,
Right.
and do nothing else. You cripple them,
Yeah.
until you
So
get
this is very similar to Carl's strategy in our second game, except
I didn't humiliate you enough.
Right.
I just I tried to domino through
Yes.
everyone, and then when I got to my 4th empire, I was trying to do this too.
Yeah.
Was when I came unstuck. Well, I should have just kept hitting you 3 again and again, but that wouldn't have been very fun for the humans. I suspect.
No, it's not. It's not fun against players, which is part of the reason why I didn't go to war with Jake, because I didn't want to break down our working relationship.
Yeah, there is
Right.
there is a funny sort of like thing where you want people to have a good time so that they'll play again in the future. You know, like you don't want to just be like dominating someone and then go up to them afterwards and be like, "Hey, wasn't that a great game?"
So normally I'll happily crush people in games, but this feels more like Stellaris feels more role playing when some other 4X games feel more like a competition.
Yeah.
And Stellaris feels to me a little less like that and a little more like, hey, we're making a fun science fiction novel and everyone gets to have fun.
It's interesting. I think I mentioned this on a previous podcast. We take breaks during the games, and we all stand around. We talk about strategy and the board state and all this other stuff. And it's interesting. I think everyone, besides wanting everybody else to have fun, I think at the back of everyone's mind is also like, in a future game, they may be an ally, and or I may need to work with them, and I don't want to just like break trust
Don't want to
for
damage my
a
reputation.
single game advantage.
I mean, you don't want to do what we were saying Mike was doing, where like for months leading up to the game, bragging about how he's going to destroy everyone, and then so nobody trusts him during the game at all.
Exactly, because you're. I mean, the person behind the computer matters.
Yeah,
very much.
Right. I think like the human tributaries are also a bit of a sticky situation, because while they're at a disadvantage, like the AI is never going to go and curry favor with external threats and engineer their independence. But a human is just like so nasty as a vassal if they don't want to be.
Right.
It's such a, because they have vision of you. They can do a lot of nasty stuff.
I mean,
yeah, I mean, they
also,
can be relaying that information to the enemy. Like it's
right.
It's fantastic.
And when the
in that
time is
way.
right, they take their 25% chunk of resources that they're giving you and use it to build a fleet to fight.
There's even a little bit of metagaming going on, where someone will leave their computer, walk over to someone else in the office, and talk to them about what's happening. And it sort of gets around some of the communication channels within the game.
I mean,
Diplomacy,
me and Ryan were like
Yes.
chatting in person, like about what to do about certain things for.
Tell us more. What are these certain things?
There was a hilarious situation you
yeah,
told me about after the game
actually,
that I
yeah,
didn't realize
God,
at
that
the
was so
time.
dumb.
It was awesome.
So,
What happened?
So there was. I was aware of a Leviathan that was coming out of a black hole very early in the game.
And
because
Ryan is heroic militarists. This is important.
It was right in the middle of one of my tributaries' borders.
Oh,
And,
just a Leviathan is one of these Night Full of Terrors thing where there's this just basically giant monster, which is you just cannot deal with early in the game, and it's very hard to build up and deal with.
And
that.
some of them like eat suns and
so
things like that.
Back to Ryan. Sorry, I just thought I'd tell the audience that.
So
I didn't even know,
I
so that's
waited.
helpful.
I was waiting for the right time to go kill it, because I've played enough games where I sort of know where I'm supposed to be. However, I had this ongoing pressure that I knew that Josiah was also nearby, and he would also like to kill this Leviathan potentially.
For science.
Yeah. So basically, I made a decision that I needed to take action before I lost it. I decided not to tell Blake and Nikolai.
Because I knew about this thing as well, because it was very close to my border, and I was eyeing it up as well and being like, maybe I'll take that on at some point.
Yeah, because even though we're in Federation, I was being greedy and selfish, and I didn't want to share.
So great.
And what happened?
So I sent in my subpar fleet. I forgot to talk to the magical curator scientist people who give you basically a foot up.
A damage boost.
A damage boost on destroying these things. I forgot to do that, and I sent my subpar fleet in. And it was so close. It was so close that I literally fought it for the full 4 to 5 minutes, where I watched it just cling on to life.
Wow.
And just slowly tear through my fleet. I'm like, it's so close. I can't stop now. I can't stop now. And I basically just wiped out my entire fleet that way, losing to this thing. And I was like, God damn it. But I knew exactly what I needed to do for next time. I got the 25% damage boost and started building up my fleet again. And just when I go over to talk to Blake, I was like, all right, this time I'm going to be smart. I'm going to get Blake to help me.
And we brought it up on screen. We
had
could
it on
clearly
the
see it.
screen had it on screen. We were looking at it, and I was talking to Blake about it, and Blake's like, "Oh, what's this thing?" And we see a little fleet fly in, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
Josiah's like scientifically teched up 30K fleet, and we watch it just obliterate it in about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm like, God damn it!
Get a little taste. of the-
And then I heard you walk off into the other room, and I just hear, "God damn it, Josiah!"
Which I had missed like the initial attempt on it. I didn't know that so many people were like had designs on killing this
Yeah.
thing, and I was just kind of like exploring around as I do, and I was like, oh right, oh that thing, I should go kill it, and just like set my fleet over there to knock it over. Oh, it was terrible.
So let's talk about some of the we've talked quite a bit about what makes Stellaris really good. Let's talk about what makes it a little frustrating. First of all, as a 4X game, it's pretty complicated, and it's gonna take a lot of hours before you actually learn the ins and outs enough that you become competent against someone else who's familiar with the game.
Yeah, that's
not necessarily a bad thing. It is just there's a pretty steep learning curve.
well, it's a huge problem for any sort of like opposed multiplayer, right?
Yes.
Like you can't just make a group of 12 people and expect them to do okay against each other.
Yeah.
Like it did.
When I was reading about the game before I was thinking about buying it, I was reading that a lot of people were recommending that it's actually quite an easy entry into the 4X.
I think you can be reasonably competent by just playing and doing the things that sound good to you, but when you get into like the systems such as like war or factions or these things that are kind of like actually really important,
Or even planning your ascension and traditions,
Right,
and
yes.
colonization and all these things.
yeah,
like,
there are
traps.
elements that have a lot of depth and complexity to them, but are very opaque the first time you see them. I still don't. I mean, I think I vaguely understand how war works, but to actually try and engage in a war is very like intimidating because
war, I think in Stellaris is like fantastically done.
It was very simple at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's just the
I
thing
have
that's
some problems with it.
the thing I think is
Oh, yeah,
confusing
to
at
be
first is setting the war goals and
Yes.
like what are you actually doing and what's the war score and all that. But once you sort of realize like each goal has like a score and
Yep.
you can only have 100. They can only add up to like less than 100.
right.
Once you figure that out, I really like that instead of just saying like in other like 4X games where you go to war and you're just at war until
they're
that
gone.
person is dead.
Yeah.
This is like I want to go to war and just take these specific planets or liberate this or like or stop atrocities and stop people from being slavers
best war
and
goal.
things like that. Like the war ends when you've achieved the goal, and it's not just like the war ends when you've wiped out that person.
Which is an awesome sounding system. However, when you have to actually select those war goals, for example, you want your opponent to seed some planets.
Yep.
You have to have a fairly good knowledge of where those planets are for
yeah,
that to ever
yeah.
make any sense.
Yep.
If you want them to seed planets, you want them to be near your territory, and that means when you're fighting Ego, when he's got 40 planets,
Just scrolling
and you
through
can
this massive
you
list.
can seed 5 of them or
Well,
whatever.
I got a pro tip for you. There's a search bar. So if you go to the area on your say you're going to Ego and you
Yeah.
want to take 3 systems on your border,
Sure.
You'll bring your screen up to those. You'll set your war goals and you'll just type in the first few letters of one of those
Okay.
systems, and all the planets in that system
Yeah,
will pop up,
right.
and you can just go bang,
It
bang,
is-
bang.
It is so. It is possible, but this is definitely like Nick's concern here is valid. This is a UI problem that
Yep.
like
Yes.
Paradox has solved in Europa Universalis, where you just like you look at the map, you click on the systems that you want, and it finds those planets or
Yeah, that,
whatever.
right.
that would be
or,
very
or
helpful.
even just like if I'm mousing over one of them, highlight it on the map,
Yeah.
right? Or
Well,
or-
no, I think
if
I think even like it's probably critically important in the future that they actually just let you click on stuff on the galaxy map and say I want
sure.
these ones.
I mean, that would be fantastic.
I also
yeah.
want them to have
And it's easy,
menu
right? I
options
don't know why they
of,
haven't.
I want a quick thing to take
Like
a bunch of planets.
nearby
or-
planets or something like
yeah,
that.
because
Yeah.
I mean, I love that system. And they've got a game called Victoria 2 set in like 19th
yeah.
century, and the system works beautifully, and it feels like you're in 19th century nation, carefully orchestrating and choosing your things for the war. It doesn't always feel right in the sci-fi game. In fact, sometimes it feels really wrong. It's like, why does the devouring swarm have to pick its goals
And then stop,
and
yeah.
then have a 10-year guaranteed peace, which would make sense if they were a 19th century empire. It doesn't make sense if they're slobbering aliens. If I'm playing super militaristic, why can I not have it that I'm just always at war?
Yep.
And it's kind of cool when we're a federation and literally cannot work out the maths of a war.
It's frustrating, but it is also
that
like,
felt cool.
enjoyable.
But it was literally, we tried to go to war twice. It took us an hour of our time trying to negotiate
Yeah.
The goals under which
both,
everyone
not
is
just
happy.
person to person, but literally mechanically trying to get one that worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
And failed.
Yep.
Like,
It would be cool if in that situation you can sweeten the pot by being like, here, have these goals, but also here's like a ton of minerals for as like a payment
bribe.
to come. Yeah,
Right.
bribe you to go to war.
yeah, or,
Sure.
or even just sort of say you have a slavery neighbor, the Federation wants to deal with them. Click a menu option that works out some war goals that roughly do that. We don't care if it's exact or exactly what we want.
That would be nice. Yeah, because we play Stellaris at like a fairly high speed.
With
and
no pausing.
And with no pausing. And there's actually, this is something I've been considering. Like, I think if these two big player federations that we have, if one of them declares war on another, I think I actually probably will need to pause the game, go and make sure the federation that was declared on gets to set their goals, because it'll just be such a confusing...
Yes.
like massive mobilization thing, and it's really easy in Stellaris to forget to set your defensive
Right.
goals.
Or to do them
So-
properly.
Yeah. The worst part of
So
war.
we'd have to break the rule almost just to make it work, and it shouldn't be that way.
The war system, as complicated as it is, where it really starts to break down is when you have been declared war upon, and you have to set your defensive goals while you're being attacked, and you have to be managing your fleet. It feels like, okay, I'm already at a disadvantage because someone's got the jump on me, but now I have to, in order for the war to stop, I don't want to be in this war. I have to make sure that their war goals don't, like, they don't succeed, and I have to set mine and succeed at those. And
Right.
it just is it's too much.
You choose which ones you enforce, but it's also very easy to not choose any.
Yeah.
Yes,
And,
well, it's just there's too much going on in that.
and it's
Right, and
terrible
you're
when you
you're
win a
concerned
war
about
and you
defending
haven't
yourself.
asked for enough.
Yeah.
Like the only way I got any good at war in Stellaris was to play some single player games where I went, I'm going to go as warlike as possible. I don't care what the result is. I'm just going to learn how this works.
Have to figure.
And you actually tend to find war is easier than you realized. And the war goal system is okay when you're going one-on-one all the time.
But it's so bad for like the first time somebody plays it.
Yeah. And you can make such, like, there's so many moments in Stellaris where you do something so critically bad in a second that make you want to basically quit.
Yeah. there's a lot of
And if
work
you're
to
playing a
save.
multiplayer game, and at the moment our one's going to go for like 12, 13 hours,
Yeah. It's a big investment.
when there are mistakes you can make that take 5 seconds and basically ruin your entire game.
Yeah, or you drastically alter the course of it, at least. Although, because I think some players, like you and I, Carl, have a somewhat different view where there's no such thing as a ruined playthrough. It's just
A different story.
interesting different stories.
Although
that
that
can be
being said,
told.
I've one of the
yeah.
night ones we did, and I sent my fleet up against someone, and my fleet disintegrated, and theirs didn't, because even though the numbers were about the same, they didn't line up well. Super bad feel. And I've done the out like that game where I just wailed on Nikolai at the beginning, and his fleet
went
fell
great.
over, and mine didn't.
Yeah,
And admittedly, it wasn't so bad for him, but mostly because I didn't do what Rian did to the AI and hit him every 10 years and humiliate him.
I think. It's tricky. Like we were discussing after the game. I think like you did a very like flavorful tributary sort of thing, but if you had just waged wars of annihilation, you probably would have like it would have worked really well.
The game doesn't. There's sort of a boom strategy and there's a rush strategy, but there's not really a good defense against a rush.
I took all the options for defense against a rush that were available, but I was not the first player.
If I
rush.
decided I will wipe Nikolai out and use the bones of his empire to wipe Nick out, and then
and so on,
and before you realized it,
yeah,
you either tend to a game where everyone does the same thing, or there can be some bad feels.
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
I mean, I had is when you attacked Nikolai, I had immediately started creating defensive armies, just because that's the only thing I could do at that point. And you came over with your fleet, and you're like, oh, this is a fairly tough army, but you blew through it still. And then I was like, okay, I guess I'm a tributary. There was nothing I could really do about that.
And my entire game from setting my empire had been
aggression from the start.
And minerals and corvettes.
Yep.
And that game, that strategy, there are strategies in this game where it doesn't feel like there's a good counter.
Yeah, and it feels kind of like young, except you got to remember that this game has been released for a year, so it's, they're pretty slow at addressing this kind of thing. And with I have some hope with the war goal thing that they will actually improve it dramatically, because in some of their other games, like EU4 is actually a really good multiplayer competitive game, because when a war starts, you don't have this like massive overhead to define all of your goals. Instead, it's just kind of like a fluid state thing where you can negotiate for peace at any point with anything that you wish, and decide based on what the other players want and how much they can afford to refuse your offer. What the conclusion of the war.
I like
be.
premeditating my wars.
Yes, I think you do get a discount for premeditated stuff, but being the defender doesn't place that onus on you.
You can also, in EU4 and some of their other games, you can kind of have two empires which end up bickering at their borders in the entire time.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas in Stellaris, you kind of have these all or nothing wars, or you get dramatic peace in the galaxy, and there's no espionage system. You can't go out there and force a war, and you...
I would love
there's not enough
an
good
espionage system where you could influence the factions of other empires.
Yeah, or even if you just sort of did something to make two other empires fight, or like you say, if you could say, they've got some factions, I've sent my spies, I know what they are, I'm going to start funding this one.
Right, change the way that government is run.
Yeah. The closest, I think, the closest you can really get to that, I think, is when someone you don't like is at war with someone you do like, and you just funnel.
Yeah, and that's very much at the top state level.
Yeah. So you're just like funding. You're doing a proxy war, basically.
If it wasn't for the in-game crises, I think and when I first played the game before it had all its expansions, that mid-game boring nothing happens was terrible after such an awesome beginning.
So I blame Josiah. Because the fact that this is even happening in our game.
Is he the peacekeeper?
Who can go to war if
Yeah, so there were a few times where I almost went to war with Ego, and I reckon I could have done it at the time.
Yeah.
So when he was going to war with the Heart people, I'm like, I imagine his army's on the other side of his place. I'm sure I could rock through. And
was this when he was AI or when he was Mike?
When he was AI.
Oh, okay.
I was going to do it when he was Mike, which would have been easier, I think. But
yeah, definitely.
AI and
Mike, I hope you're not listening to this podcast.
But even when he got up to about like 14, 20k, like I feel like I could have done it.
Yeah.
I didn't do it for other reasons. I think I got distracted. But from then, I've not bothered to do another one against any human people, because like I don't feel like going to war with anyone when Josiah's like right there, and he could just decide to not be on my side at any point.
I think that's a fault of the system, though. It does. I've seen often it forms into these blocks of peace, and there's not anything to foment war. And part of that, I think, is also the combat system so all or nothing.
Yes,
it is like big solitary fleets, and I know Josiah may disagree with this. And as soon as the fleets hit, one wins and one loses. And it usually results in one side doesn't have a fleet.
Right.
And then
it just snowballs.
They can get jumped on.
Yeah, there's like, it's probably not worth getting into, but there are some things that you can do at a very expert level of play that are maybe interesting, but they're not interesting enough, and they have that cardinal sin of being like requiring too much knowledge of the game and not being systemically
I also
incentivized.
think your assumption is that your opponent is also not an expert in just going well with one big fleet.
So
does better.
Combat to me, the combat looks fantastic, and at a very surface level is fun and fairly easy. I think what makes combat not that good in Stellaris, there's two elements to it. There's first of all the all or nothing nature of it, and second of all the fact that your fleet strength is dictated by a score. and doesn't actually tell you any more information than that.
Because the score is like it's an attempt at telling you
It's
how
a
well it'll
statistical
do.
indicator,
Yes.
but nothing more than that.
But the problem is, there's underlying all of that. There are different weapon types. There are different defenses types. There's like movement and evasion, all these other things, and that's all. Unless you go looking for that, you may have this giant fleet, and you'll get crushed because your opponent actually looks at what your
Also,
Interestingly,
composition
evasion
is.
is counted into your score.
Right, but you don't know. Like there are things that are fairly good against evasion.
So evasion is counted into your score, but if you go up against somebody with 100% arc emitters, then it shouldn't be counted into your score.
right.
And there's no way to. Yeah.
Also, there is a supposed sort of rock paper system in their rock paper scissors system. Actually, it is more like a rock paper system because there are asymmetries in there.
The scissors are missing.
Where where the scissors are missing, and like there are fundamental broken bits in that combat system, which then mean you can't play rock paper scissors. It is more. Yeah. It is not as clean as it should be.
And it feels misleading at times that your fleet can be much stronger looking than something else and still get slaughtered.
Yeah. Interestingly, there's very similar systems in it to Path of Exile for the way that energy shield and evasion work.
Yes, and yet it uses a Diablo rating system.
Yeah.
Yes.
Diablo.
Yeah.
And
Diablo 3.
I also look at it and I when I see a flaw in it, I feel some pain because sometimes I recognize these flaws as Path of Exile's core systems, which you have to sort of work around, and it's like
surprisingly similar.
yeah, it is amazing. They've gone for a very similar model to the attacks and defenses.
But I think because theirs is a very PvP style, like if we have the same issue in our PvP where the rock paper scissors system makes it frustrating.
And you have to
can
build
be hard
huge
countered.
workarounds
Yes.
to it.
But in PvE, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
they all
and-
have their
and in
own
fact,
strengths and weaknesses, and you factor them into your build.
And we discussed the endgame crises. They've actually done cool PvE things that are unique
Yes.
to those, which you don't encounter elsewhere, other places, that give you lots of fun, characterful reasons to build these things that otherwise don't work so well against other players. Yeah, which is there's a lot of analogs there.
So combat to me, and I mean war is sort of at a higher level to that, but the basically conflict in that game is can be very frustrating. I think like creating your society is super awesome. The sort of crazy things that can happen to your empire, or the way you can like change it, and the huge branching options and all the crazy events. There is so much fun to be had in Stellaris. But the conflict is something that is frustrating at even the best of times, really.
Yeah,
I still really like it.
I
think there's a lot of nuance in there.
Well-
And I don't actually agree. It's just the stronger fleet wins.
It's
Well, that's what I'm saying. The stronger fleet doesn't always win because it's
Not just the
and
number.
Nick, and Nick's
No, I
saying that
don't mean the
amount
number,
of-
but when two fleets meet, it's
But you don't have to meet to win a war.
used.
You don't have to.
Ryan,
But that's
Ryan's
another
been,
that's another
Ryan's been
flaw of
fighting
that system.
wars and kind of
There's no way to defend your borders because of the transport systems. You can skip right past someone's fleet and into their bases and start
Depending
doing
on
stuff.
depending on your FTL drive, definitely, which is another.
But even
part of the
not
nuance.
depending on your FTL, you just need a range that skips over the star that their
so
fleet is on.
Ryan's in our game playing the very honorable militaristic FTL type of hyperlanes, right? So actually, if you are in a war with Ryan, it's very straightforward, and he has to go through your exterior to get to your interior,
Which is actually
nice.
One thing I love in the game is
Yeah.
the tensions between the different FTL
Yeah.
systems. And then if you go hyperlanes, you really care about particular systems. Basically, the hyperlane players have to travel down set pathways.
Yeah.
And most of the time, only they can see these pathways.
It creates a web between the stars.
Yeah.
Basically.
And then the other sorts are warp drive, where you can kind of go anywhere, but your distance is limited and it has other problems. And wormholes, where you have to build machines, but once you've got your machines, you can go through them very easily.
Interestingly, hyperlane is very good in close situations.
Yeah, you
so
don't
it's
you don't
very
want to be
easy
fighting
to-
a hyperlane
No,
fleet in
I
their own
love
territory.
militaristic hyperlane
so good.
sides. They're so
Yeah.
much fun to play.
Yeah, they're very versatile and short range, but when it comes to starting a war and being quite a fair distance away from your opponent, you're at an immediate disadvantage. Just because when you've got giant wormhole ranges, they can just hop, hop, hop.
Yep.
But if you manage to take out their wormhole generator machines,
Yeah,
Yes,
but you
that's-
don't want
that's
to want to
awesome.
play like whack-a-mole when you start a war. You don't want to be like jumping around your web of stars trying to look for machines,
Right.
especially when potentially you might have to waste 1 to 2 minutes traveling across subspace
Oh,
trying to get to it, whereas this person is potentially has a web of these
yeah.
wormholes.
Although
everywhere.
arguably you can know where they are. In fact, one of the possibly flaws of the game is
Oh, right. Yeah.
being able to be aware of things and just having a better board sense almost, or game sense.
Yeah, like
Really,
intelligence.
there's so many ways to master that game. Like Josiah's economic abilities in the game scare me a little because I just haven't got the same skills or haven't spent the time to learn how to
Well,
do
yeah,
that.
It's just like all the
Nuances.
systems that you can synergize together
Yeah.
to get more resources.
Which means, whereas if I understand the board and I know where someone's webways are because I've paid attention to that, I could take them out very quickly.
But you'd have to be like some sort of strategic genius that's got this all marked out, and that you've been doing your spying for
Yeah,
years
but-
preparing for this war.
You can kind of learn to do that.
Yeah.
Although the game does feel very tolerant for different, like
Play styles.
often it doesn't, the way, at least the way we play, it doesn't matter if empires are remarkably different in strength.
No.
But this is kind of because we're playing
It's friendly.
playing space opera
Yeah.
simulator rather than
Yeah.
go kill everyone
Space
and rip
race.
their throats
Yeah.
out.
I think a very interesting game would be we all go super aggressive, but we're all restricted to hyperspace lanes, because then you end up with like choke points and
Yeah.
like you can manage your borders and
It
things
would
like that.
that would feel quite a lot like Civilization at that point.
But
Yeah, it
there'd be a lot
probably
less
would.
cool story. But me and
Yeah.
Nikolai
Yeah.
would probably have fun trying to.
I mean,
rip
it's a
each other
different. It's just
apart.
it's just a different game. You know, it's a different game
Yep.
mode at that point. You know,
They're actually they're just like the developers of Stellaris are actually discussing that they don't like how the different FTL types interact with defending your space either, and their proposed solution at the moment. So we might see like in 6 months if we do another Stellaris game, they are going to restrict everybody to hyperlanes, but add sort of like possibly natural wormholes that link
Oh,
regions of
interesting.
space, and have like blocked regions of space that require a higher technology level of hyperlanes. But they really wanted to keep that sort of the stars feeling, like every alien has a unique approach to
yeah,
FTL.
I really do like
'Cause,
that.
yeah, it's awesome, but it's so unbalanced.
I love
sometimes.
the asymmetry is awesome, but it also does mean if we were playing with winning in mind, then that falls apart fairly fast. I think.
I do like what actually happens in the for real conflicts that occur, because like you can theory craft out, you know, I'm winning at this point, I can do this and this will beat that and so on. But when it comes down to actual like go time in that like short game where we were constantly at war, you actually do run into blockages where, oh, actually, you know, there are too many players and there are too many variables, and one thing will not work against all of them.
I also, when I understood the game less, I almost had more fun. It's like, why are they acting so weird? And then working out
Yeah.
it's because they've got a different FTL system,
Yep.
Yeah.
and they're behaving like aliens because the board is different to them.
Well, I remember the game we played, one of the first Office games, when we were right next to each other. You were hyperspace and I was wormholes, and you were saying early on, like, how is Blake above me and below me? Like, this is crazy.
Yes, whereas I was this very hyperlane, and like those were my Imperial spiders, and they cared about border range.
Yeah.
And I was super border range, so you just watch me go blob, blob,
Yep,
blob, blob.
Yep. It was
And,
frightening,
and so
actually.
we were both terrified of each other
Yeah.
doing these weird things.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, and actually it's concerning that they might lose some of that if they go to a more like terrain-based system.
But it was
I think
more
they
fun
would-
because I didn't understand
Yeah.
it, which I
Yeah.
think for both of us was like, why are they so
Yeah.
doing these terrifying different things?
I think that variety helps a lot, though, because I mean, besides it providing a lot more replayability
And cool stories.
and cool stories as someone playing those different things, playing against those different things, and those combinations of different things, makes each like game feel very unique, and like also the random events, where they like appear, based on your travel technology can make those like those chains feel very different. Suddenly I have to get pets that are like, you know, on the other side of the galaxy, and I can't travel through this person's space because I'm on hyperlanes. I just can't do it.
There's nothing like
wormholes, you know.
there's nothing like going to war because you want to finish a quest.
Right. Yes.
It's the best. It's the best reason. Oh, actually, yeah. There's a thing that I noticed, probably to do with us being so nice, but they have scripted a single solitary Archduke Ferdinand event into the game, which is supposed to encourage you to go to war. And it's happened to Blake and I, and I've seen it happen to somebody else.
Oh, is it the fleet maneuvers?
But yeah, it's when you have a large fleet and you're sitting next to somebody who's not necessarily your ally. You can cause some diplomatic tension by having massive fleets maneuvering right next to there.
The thing is with players, you know that that's just an event. Like, it's not actually going to do anything.
Yeah, I RP'd it, though, and I lodged a diplomatic objection and sent a stern...
I did the same thing in the game last night.
So you did that, I had that event come up, and I did the maneuvers, and then a while later, you... I think had the event, and you did the maneuvers, and I was just like, yeah, it's just an event. Josiah's not mucking about. Like, he just cares about tech.
I think you need like actual casses.
Oh,
like an event says if you go to war this person, you can, and you've got an advantage or something, which I realize would feel bad and too random, but there does need to be more tension causing things in the mid game.
I think the way this should be handled personally, and based on I probably have the least knowledge of the game here. Just that's my disclaimer. The faction system is severely underutilized as far as establishing conflict goes.
But it's also quite new as well. It wasn't in the original game. It was.
Okay.
It was like
it's a good addition and it's much better than it used to be.
Yeah.
Consider the possibility that you could influence a system, influence a faction, have that faction separate from their parent, and now you've got like potentially a war between those two factions, and you can just keep feeding them resources. Like this is
and you can guarantee their independence or absorb them. So this is actually hilariously a thing that is in the game, but the scripts for it are somewhat mismanaged. So it must be slavery. It must be slavery where the overlord is critically mismanaging their slaves. And the empire that the slaves join would have to be egalitarian, and in that case, this cascade that you just described happens.
That seems very specific,
but it's too specific, and it needs and it's only when they added this faction system that they put it in. So they just need to broaden that out.
I actually had a event like that show up when I as a Hivemind, when I take over a planet that is occupied. You automatically
Nick, you were saying you had immigrants, right?
Yes.
Do you know why you have immigrants?
No. Is it because of that thing?
It's because Blake is eating people.
They're running away.
Oh, yes. Oh, you're talking about the refugees I've had.
Yeah,
yeah, they're refugees.
You ate two factions.
Yep.
And both of those, like about 2 minutes later, I had a message that said, the Vorfels or whatever have taken refuge at one of your planets. I'm like, okay, cool. So now I've got a planet with 6 different alien types on it.
You're welcome. That's just me giving to the universe.
Hey, they're stoked to be there.
Yeah.
My happiest.
But the thing is that Nick's right. This should impel his factions to war with you.
Yes.
To try
Also,
and,
our federation, despite being peaceful, should have a cause for war.
Yes.
We should be able to say, oh, this gives us an in.
Right. There are atrocities being committed.
We can go easily together and deal with this.
Yes.
Right.
The other interesting thing is that Blake has introduced a potential immigration problem into your empire, depending on...
you set your policies.
Who knows what...
but I mean more like the people that you're bringing into your empire might not...
They might change factions and stuff.
They might change factions.
Yeah.
They might not like the way that you run...
Yes.
And then become unhappy people.
But I have no... I mean, other than the fact that
Xenophilic empires are really well equipped to deal with that, though. Like, Xenophiles are the sorts of people that you could expect to have a military and pacifist faction in the same empire and have them both happy.
Right. And the problem with that event in general is it's basically random. Like, he did a thing, and it caused a thing because of my setup to happen. But he didn't intend for that to happen, and neither did I.
Yep.
And so while the refugees may cause problems, it's not really a strategic feature. It's like it's just a consequence of some stuff that happened.
Yeah, and it gives Nick the player an idea, but Nick's empire doesn't get any mechanical free pass on their pacifism declaring war policy, or
I can't now. I don't have like information about his empire, which they totally could have had because they were part of it briefly or something, you know.
Yep. Or a faction
They were
demand
food.
from your Oh boy.
I mean, I guess food is part of an empire.
The game has some great stuff when you've been mean. Like you can go, these population are all set to being food.
Yeah,
and then suddenly you eat them.
You were telling me something insanely disturbing. Where
yes, there are disturbing things in this game.
Where what was it? You had you'd marked down somebody's species as food, but then was trading food with the parent.
And you can get
God.
gives you this
Selling food
huge
to the parent
food bonus.
species.
Whoa.
And yes, you can do disturbing things in this game.
Yeah.
That's a South Park episode you just described.
And mostly, I want to be. There's an author called Ian M. Banks, and he writes about the super nice liberal culture that's
culture.
like super anarchist and and super nice. And I kind of want to role play them in this game, and you kind of can. But man, if you want to be evil space empire, the game, yes, you can
a
totally
lot
go.
of avenues for that.
I can eat your people, and because they're massive, they produce heaps of food, and now we can sell your food back to you.
Yeah,
And then
So
they can
definitely,
genetically modify these species to be delicious, which
Yes.
will give you more food.
Yeah.
There are some lines that I don't cross in this game, and turning alien species into food is a bit of a is a
What
no for
about
me.
have you ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I haven't read it.
There's a
no.
cow in that is genetically engineered to want to be eaten.
Yeah.
Oh god.
It's their purpose in life. I assume actually if you go deep enough in the indoctrination and genetic engineering, that's you probably essentially create that. You monsters.
And then,
Yeah.
Your food and you like it, sort of thing.
and then there's the chemical bliss where you know, if you've got some unhappy populations, you can just force feed them drugs until they're happy. And there's some disturbing stuff. But I also like the fact that if it's turned up in a science fiction novel, particularly if it's a space opera novel, someone at Paradox who makes Stellaris has obviously gone, this has got to be in the game, because there's all these
Fantastic
hooks
ideas
onto
all
things
throughout it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a strategic resource that is basically spice, isn't there?
Yeah. Oh
Yes.
yeah. I'm currently exporting great deals of spice.
Yeah.
And they've obviously
our-
played 40k because if you want to be the Imperium of Man, you basically can totally be. So,
Fanatic
like
purifiers.
any science fiction novel, they seem to have tried to jam in there, and a lot of the jankiness and badness is because they've tried to be rich and interesting.
Right,
Yeah.
and you can. It also means that you can kind of look past some of these big flaws, just
Yeah.
because there's so much cool.
Yeah,
stuff,
that's true.
So many
War
cool
war
moments.
is annoying, but the story around it is so cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think the thing is like it can be janky because I mean it's not an esport.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I generally actually play strategy games like I'm out there to rip people's throats out and to take every advantage I can. And this game, like if I had that attitude, I'd go, this game's junk. I started with this terrible uneven position, and there's these random events.
What the hell? I got
and
Yeah.
it doesn't feel, but it's because everything doesn't feel fair. And it doesn't really matter to the role playing aspects if you're different strengths. It just works for me.
And I actually I like balanced strategy games, but I love asymmetrical strategy games because they cause situations like unlikely alliances and shifting like allegiances where you may potentially come into a situation where you decide that you must fight against like this block because if you don't, they'll become too strong and they'll win the entire game.
Yeah, so I'll look over all the flaws in this game.
Yeah.
I think, especially in the style that we are playing, because we're all in the same room, we all work together, and we're all playing together. A lot of the imbalances end up getting sort of smoothed out, just because we keep cutting the tall poppy down, and we try and bring up our allies and that sort of thing.
And sometimes that includes people treating themselves as the tall poppy.
Yes.
And go, I can't.
I don't.
I
I
can't
I
be this
already am too
threatening.
good at this game. I
Yeah.
want people to have a good time. Yeah, that sort of thing.
This is mostly Josiah.
Yes,
right?
Josiah.
But then you fall into your own sort of
I mean,
weird
the-
role that's quite interesting in the galactic community anyway. Like you're like this third party.
He's a fallen empire of his own
He's
creating.
an unfallen empire.
I prefer I prefer Ascendant Empire. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Although it feels like you can sometimes mess with strategies, but you know.
it's
but if he
it's
wants
true
to do that,
Well,
that's
also-
totally valid strategy.
What we should do actually is if you're slightly militaristic and you're next to Josiah, is you should actually wail on Josiah.
You should
until he's
attack me
dead.
at the start of the game.
Yeah.
As Blake described.
But
But also then it's like that's
Josiah
that's
goes
a bit-
home now.
Yeah, that's right. And if we've just started a 3-evening session,
I'm kind of cagey. Generally, like, so as Blake was describing, you're really vulnerable. I have several times been like wiped out from the start of the game, but I usually take that as an opportunity to escape to a more distant location.
yeah. But if
and
someone
become
actually went,
less
well,
powerful.
we're going to kill you and we'll
I
set
would-
our war
yeah.
goals to destroy you utterly,
Yep,
which we generally don't.
we
generally
don't. But if
Yeah.
somebody does that, you establish a colony during the war, and that's outside of their goals, and so you survive.
Yeah, which
Right.
is also
It's silly.
if
It's great,
if
though.
you can and they
Yeah.
don't. Yeah, if they're not
But yeah, it kind of plays into the whole threat thing where if somebody's really pushing for you to be wiped out, you can potentially get a lot of diplomatic sympathy where you could turn however many people it takes to stop them against them.
Yeah, it's just that if you do rush,
Oh,
and,
so good in Stellaris.
your ramp up is so fast and so ruthless compared to everyone who's trying to play a longer game.
It really require it's true that our like polite rules or not even rules, but just politely not going hyper aggressive and trying to break the game in the very early stages is kind of required to have as much fun as we are.
I think there does need to be more ability to pivot to a defense, which might still leave you behind. But
Although when it comes to me, I would totally encourage anyone in our current play group to definitely try and stop me in the early game because that's when
The
you
thing
should
is,
do it.
though, I've thought about that, and the thing is, though, I really like the research agreements that
I have so much utility.
I obviously, if you've already decided, I was already new to bet, I wouldn't be taking you down. But also, if I
Right,
was
yeah,
militaristic, then do I roll that I'm next to you, or do I roll next to someone who's new to bet and
yeah.
roll over them?
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the interesting like geopolitics thing as well. Like I've created several protectorates and like tried to uplift diverse species, but also with this like huge technological advantage. Rian, for instance, in his like expansion, is feeling constrained, even though I'm not particularly directing any like guarantees over that direction. He just doesn't feel like he can afford to take the risk. Of,
You're
like,
an unknown,
Yeah.
basically. You're a variable in his war plans, and
And
he doesn't know what you're going to
and
do.
I have I have effects that I don't even foresee.
Yeah.
Which is yeah.
The next question I have: there are victory conditions in this game, which in our current game feel real nebulous and far
I have
away.
never played I've never finished a game.
Right, so I've played one game to completion solo, but most strategy games I care a lot about the victory conditions. This one
Right.
I don't really. Is anyone actually playing for the victory here? Are we trying to get our federations?
I'm keeping tabs on it.
Yeah,
Stellaris
me and
Stellaris only has one victory condition, and what aren't they all control number of planets, and then there are variations on whether you
So
your
this
allies
federation
are tributaries?
controls 60% of the galaxy, which
Yeah.
is which was added late. That wasn't in the original version.
Right.
That was for the people who wanted to play namby-pamby culture, and that's as close as they got. And I'm glad they added it, but it still doesn't feel. It feels kind of.
You're still out there claiming territory
It's
as,
the
as a
easiest one
peaceful
to win.
federation.
And then there's own 40% of the galaxy as a single player, which used to kind of be the only way you could win, and it kind of meant you had to play the military game. But that wasn't necessarily the most fun to do. Winning wasn't the most fun thing to do in the game. And what's the third one? It's basically wipe out everyone else, right?
Yeah, or subjugate everyone,
Right.
Oh, be the only unique empire, and well,
which is I feel like not too hard either.
but none of these are like with Stellaris in general. It doesn't feel like a game that actually should have an end state. It's more of a story engine. Like
yeah.
It's not going to give you that satisfying conclusion unless you draw your own conclusion from the events.
And I could happily play with a group where everyone said, "Okay, we're playing this to win it."
But what is winning?
But I feel
right?
like that wouldn't affect the way I would play that game.
Oh, see,
So for me, what I'm looking forward to is seeing what in-game crisis we come up with,
Right.
and seeing if we eventually ever overcome that And
Right.
that'll pretty much
if we
be
can
where I'm happy to
survive.
stop.
Yeah.
The surviving factions are the winners or whatever, something.
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and that might leave someone with the chance to go, I can now grab 40% of the planets out there.
Yeah, maybe.
That'll be a bit hollow
maybe.
though if half the people are like, all right, cool, I'm done, and then one person's like, but wait, I want to conquer you now.
Yeah, or the other way
under the
is
radar.
if someone was to get sneakily 40% of the
Yeah.
planets while we were still in the
Ego.
mid-game crisis and going,
Well-
but I want to finish this fight.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's actually kind of the thing. Like that screen pops up, it has no effect. It's just a
but
message.
that's also not necessarily the most important thing
Yeah.
that happens. Is like if planets started getting eaten and it turned out Ego, because they'd taken so many planets, had a win screen, I'd be like, well, I want to see the rest of this.
Yeah,
right.
like it's in Stellaris, the victory is meaningless.
Yeah, but normally, I mean, I could play a game where everyone didn't treat it as meaningless.
True.
And while you would play the same, I suspect I would play different.
Well, I think if you wanted to play a game like that, I think everyone going militaristic and restricting to hyperlanes would be the way to go.
150 stars and
Yep.
start next
Yeah,
to
and
each
it's
other.
it's
Right.
basically a StarCraft skirmish.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Space chest.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
is unfortunate if you played it, that actually 9/10 of the game disappears.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm playing minerals turn into
Yep.
corvettes,
Yep.
turn into
Yep.
and turn into victory.
Yeah. Turn victory. Yes.
But then Endgame Crisis happens, so who knows what's going
No,
to
the game's well over. Like there's no mid game in that case. It's like
Yeah, the like there is only war early game Stellaris is pretty one dimensional. It's not nearly as fun a game because nobody's ever going to get the technology to get to an
Right,
end game crisis.
yeah,
Yeah.
and because there's not a strong turtle, then you could go, well, I'll play for the long game. Oh, what's that coming through my borders?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because this comes back to conflict being kind of, you can skip around combat if you want.
Yeah.
You can't really defend.
I mean, it's not the worst thing when
It's-
you
it's
consider like
actually-
space is quite big. It's like, what are you gonna do? You can't realistically just defend
Would
all
you?
this empty space.
Would you? You know how some defensive stations force a fleet to warp to it when it goes to that system. Could you have like defensive stations that had like an actual galaxy on the galaxy
Radius.
map radius, and any fleet that was going to go through that, not through the system, but through the bubble that the
Right.
system
Can
creates?
only
A large
FTL
influence.
there.
That'd be a cool
would
fortress
force
one.
you
Also,
to, would
even-
force you to
So I think
go
the
there.
top defensive thing in this is like an 8K station,
Yeah. So
and it's little more than a road bump.
Yeah, they don't mean anything at the.
it's
Even now, they don't mean
possible-
anything, and we're not even near
I
the
mean,
end game.
sometimes there are 30 seconds where a fleet is engaged,
Yeah.
and they can be caught up to by another fleet.
That's all. That's all they are, is to just like slow the aggressor down so that the defender can come in with
Yeah.
their fleet. Like that.
right. Which I mean, in that capacity, they have a use, and I've certainly considered like because fleets have to leave from the exterior of a gravity well against a hyperlane opponent, you can breadcrumb a bunch of things at the center of stars,
Right.
and very cheap things that just interdict, and you would slow down by possibly years the amount of time that it takes a hyperlane
But it
enemy to
is
maneuver through your space.
That's a weird.
And that also-
It's very
strategy,
weird.
And if you're
like-
playing militaristic game, you don't even get to that bit. necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because these are too expensive and too weak. Yeah. Which is hopefully something they'll address. They actually, in terms of like the galactic scale interdiction, that's something that they considered as well, but like the technical hurdles that they cite as being problems is that it's very, very confusing to be an attacker attacking into defended space, and it's very difficult to meaningfully decide as a defender which interdiction zone things get drawn into given the angles that they can approach from.
Right.
The next
yeah.
question is, will they lose too much cool stuff while
Yeah.
trying to make it fair?
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the really tough situation they're in at the moment. Although I'm kind of like, as someone who has probably done too much like reading into how Stellaris works, I'm kind of with Ryan in that like I actually like the fleet design, the combat, and the possibilities now that I understand it well enough to sort of do weird things with it. But the only meaningful strategy until you are way too into it is just to put all your eggs in one basket and have like one big fight per war or something like that, which is way less interesting.
Yeah, which I think it's salvageable. They can, and when I say salvageable, obviously we're playing it and having a blast. So it's not that it's broken. It's just that.
It's just these little things that just make it not absolutely perfect.
There's stuff that there's just plenty of room for improvement.
Yeah.
And it's in a game where conflict is meant to be fairly important for that to be.
And I think part of this has been the simulation is like, well, if there's big open space and there's big fleets, and then having a big fleet would probably be the right thing to do, like it was in naval combat back in the day.
It's true that it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Although if there were civilian fleets flying around running your economy, then
then you could hit
blockade.
trade
because I would
routes
love
and
to
all
have
that sort of
pirate
stuff.
raiders go.
Yep. I would love
everything.
to see a pirate faction in someone else's space and fund them.
Oh,
What I would like
How would
to
you
do
like some
is,
advanced destroyers?
Yeah.
like if you're militarist, you can already use the bombardment policy, which can like once a month destroy buildings.
Oh god. Actually, yes, there are like horrible phony wars that last forever that militarists can do.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I
it's so
do
good.
like that I can just go to war with a pacifist person and just completely wreck their factions by staying at war with them to a positive benefit of mine. But I would also really like to say, like, I don't want your planets because I'm really happy with my sector count. But I don't like that you have that planet, and I want to ruin it for you by just putting a giant fleet on top of it and bombarding it until it's all gone.
Yeah.
You just want to blow up a planet?
And in
Yeah,
particular,
potentially. But like sometimes you
Terminatus.
see some Betharian power plants or stuff, or some
yeah.
strategic resources, and all
Oh,
that. I don't want you to have
that's
fun.
too nice.
Or you see like this person's got like an entire planet of research stations, or maybe they've got habitats and Dyson spheres. I'm like, I don't want you to have that. I just want to blow it up.
But it would be interesting then to, if you could, if you had actual like sensor range of that planet, go into that planet, see what pops are there, and manipulate some sort of faction
espionage would be
to
But
to
an
revolt,
espionage
you know?
layer would be one.
I would also
Yeah.
love to be a peaceful faction that had a special circumstances
Yep.
that did the espionage.
Well,
I
right.
mean, that's the culture, right?
yeah,
There.
if you could be the culture and engage in warfare
Not war.
primarily through espionage.
But
would
I also-
be amazing.
Like that, the militaristic factions. You say you do that. This is also the game sets you up to want to be at war. You don't want to necessarily win your wars and make your factions unhappy. You actually kind of want
To be at war.
or have enemies all around you. You literally work towards that goal
Yeah.
of having rivals,
Yeah.
and then trying to keep fighting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. There are all sorts of things that they should fix with it, but if you're role playing a bit, it's actually quite characterful the way that certain empires behave.
I really liked, talking about role playing. I really liked Rian talking about basically his cult that he created, and it inspired me to create my own. Like you hear about these crazy.
What was your cult?
I wasn't aware it was a cult until
It was definitely a cult.
Blake made me listen to what I was saying. I was like, I have this empire where like everyone does what I say, and because we all follow the same religion, they all think I'm awesome.
And they're also all slaves. Like
Yeah, they're all slaves, and they like being slaves. That's the best part. And Blake's like going on about, maybe what robots could be cool because robots are awesome. I'm like, no,
Robots
no,
are
no,
cool.
slaves are cool, psychic people are cool, religion's cool,
Oh my
and
God.
being God Emperor Divine of your fucking like slave empire is way better.
That's the best, especially
Yeah.
when you're the God Emperor.
Because everyone does what you say, and because you've got religion, everyone just agrees with your way of thinking, and you just crush all independent ideas.
Suppress, yeah.
Yeah,
Which-
you put on the information quarantine. You burn the libraries and stuff. You don't bother with research because that you don't want to give people any ideas about freedom.
Yeah.
can't let these people
I-
read.
Science, what's that?
I had that with my Imperial spiders, whereas I had my Emperor spider and their heir, and the heir started a political party which said support the Emperor, and I thought
cool.
I'll support that one, and I suppressed all the other factions, and it worked really well for my
Oh, that's
fanatically
So
autocratic
delicious.
side.
Yeah, the best faction is the we love the Emperor faction.
Yeah, whereas
the only approved
Whereas
faction.
when I played the non-authoritarian ones, and you go deviant so that they have like 20 factions, and you're trying to keep them all happy.
Yeah,
it's
actually,
also fun.
gives you stuff to do, which is cool. There's I also really like that it's in other 4X games. It is not a choice whether or not you pursue technology because you need technology to do anything.
Yep.
Whereas in Stellaris, it's entirely feasible to have pretty crappy technology and a vast, important feeling empire, and you are at a disadvantage, but you can leverage other advantages like economy and the macro scale of your fleets.
Or force
And-
research bonuses through domination.
Right.
Oh, yep, that's right. You can vassalize a much more technologically superior vassal and then start osmosizing their tech.
And if you've got
great.
the income for it, you can fund other people's wars against
Yes.
your enemies, which I that's my most favorite thing to do, and I haven't gotten to do it in the game that we've been playing.
I mean, that we know of. Nobody's caught you doing it yet.
No, no one's caught me doing it.
Yeah. And the other great thing with the AIs that I like is that you can just give them, because you know you have a giant slave religion empire. If you really do need research, you can just slave away for 1,000 minerals and just give it to them, and they'll give you 30 years of one-sided research agreements, and you don't have to give anything back.
Yeah. Although with players, one should generally be cautious whether or not they wish to support the technological growth of massive slaver empires.
Or you just send a tributary request to Jake and he'll click yes.
Yes, that's right. It's perfect.
That is actually a problem with
Yes.
when we play at double speed and there's windows popping
Oh,
up
yeah.
all
Thousand
over
messages.
the place and you can't read all of them, and if you click one wrong, oops.
Yeah.
I have seen. I think it was in a game with some of my other friends, but I have totally seen a game where the AI was domineering towards a player and felt like it had a fleet advantage, and it wouldn't have shaken out as well as the AI thought in a war, but they just offhandedly sent a tributary demand, or no, a vassalization demand. And the player, because things were just going quickly, was like, yeah, agree, and ended up like within like 5 years they started being integrated, and they're like, oh God,
man.
Uh-oh.
what did I? Oh, I'm a
Wow.
vassal. Oh God. Yeah, it was great.
When they do send it to you, sometimes the text isn't very clear.
Yeah.
Like you need to be
Yeah.
reading it very carefully. Like they can have their flavor text, I don't mind that, but they should definitely at least have a subtext at the
This is
bottom
what's
saying
gonna
like
happen.
this is the
Explanation text
actual
in
result
green or
of this.
red or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, or some symbology or something
Yeah.
to be like, you will
Yeah.
vassalize.
Well,
this.
because I got a request from someone in our game. I've forgotten I have another tributary, I think, who offered to become my tribute,
Oh,
and I stared at the request for about 2 minutes,
Trying to
reading it
work
over
out
and over
which
again.
way
I
around
was just
it
like,
was.
which way is this going?
Am
I'm
I
not
your
entirely
tributary?
sure.
Are you
Yeah.
mine?
Are
Yeah.
you going to be mine or am I going to be yours? And I did it. And he was my tributary in the end. I actually don't know where this guy is. I think he splintered off from someone,
Oh,
or
weird.
maybe one of
you can
one of
you.
the uplifted people.
I mean,
but
you'd be able to
it's-
like click
it's a
on
very
their
scary
like
galaxy.
I
zoom
didn't
in on
look
their
into it
homeworld
that
and
badly. I just clicked
just
on
like-
it, saw my
Also,
resources go
we're
up. and
playing
like,
at 2 times speed. You've
Yeah.
got other things to do.
I mean that is a problem. It is
I
a game
wasted
of
enough time
sidetracking.
reading the same line of text over and over again. I'm not going to go any further. It's like plus 10 minerals.
Well,
Yeah,
that,
fine.
that's the thing when Fallen Empires send you stuff, like you need to read what the hell it is, because you could easily end up like giving
very
them
bad
25%.
situation.
And
Oh
you're,
yeah,
you
even
know.
worse. Like the last time I did it was like we want to guide you. I was like, yeah, that sounds all right. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound too bad. And they're like, guiding means you leave your federation, you give us half your fleet, and you can't have any diplomatic options anymore. I'm like, whoa.
Oh, right. right.
intense.
Oh, is
Sounds
that,
good.
is that what you meant?
All right. Well, we're pretty much out of time. We've been talking for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah.
If you haven't played Stellaris, I highly recommend it. What do you guys think?
Yep.
Yeah, worth
Oh, yeah.
worth the money?
Good time.
Definitely. It's on
it's in my top
Steam.
5.
It's on the Steam sale right now.
Although
Get it.
we should probably say you're best actually to get the DLC.
Yes.
And apparently the strategy. Well,
They have this cool policy where they put a lot of the most important features of a DLC out for free.
yeah, but there's some definite. At least the what's the most recent one?
So both
Utopia?
having Leviathans to fight and the Ascension perks
The
to give you
Ascension
a kind
perks.
of alternate end game
But
are both DLCs.
Apparently, strategy games just cost lots of money and take 4 years to release these days, which actually I'm perfectly fine with.
Check
So it is actually worth going. Yes, this is worth the extra cost. Although
Yeah.
you could wait till it's on sale because they
I've
do
seen
tend to have
Stellaris
regular
on sale
sales.
like 3 times in the last few months.
I would probably pick it up by itself and just play it before you pick up. If you're not sure, just if the core game is there's enough there that you'll figure out pretty quickly if
Yeah.
it's your thing or not, and then it's definitely worth it.
There's also the if you enjoy the DLC for single player, you can definitely seems worth it to me. I definitely picked it up. But for multiplayer, only one player ever needs to have the DLC.
Yeah.
Which is I really like for I've tried to play 4X games with other people, and if you're just like, not everybody is feeling like spending a ton of money on video games, you end up just having this weird, janky, like, okay, which things do we all have together state? And it
Yeah,
just,
which version of the game are we?
don't even
Right.
have to think about it.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
this is very easy.
So what happens though if like you start a multiplayer game with all the DLC and then you quit it and save it and then start it again in single player?
I have no idea if that's
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to go home tonight and find out.
yeah.
I'll let you
Bye
know.
bye
Just
Ascension
let us
perks.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Well, or it might
Half of my
it might-
faction vanished.
It might let you continue because they're usually pretty soft. Like they want
Yeah.
people to buy their DLC, but they have a lot of ways to play it without buying it. Which is
I have bought it. I just didn't install it because I wanted to start with the smallest feature list possible and grow out.
yeah, no, that's actually wise. Like
Yeah, it is-
especially
Oh,
playing
I
Stellaris
actually
initially.
think playing with all the features on. I mean, it's
went
not.
straight into
They
it. Jumping in
don't
the deep end.
overwhelm you. There's just more shit that happens
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
the game good.
Yeah.
In my
I wasn't
yeah.
even aware of what the features were.
Yeah, and things like the curator and the artists.
Oh,
If
I
you-
love those features.
Oh,
Yeah,
those
if,
that's
if
DLC?
you if you
Yeah.
I think
they are
it is,
DLC, and if
actually.
you played without it,
That would be
you're
quite
kind of
bad
missing
for me.
out. But they don't really cost you brain space to
No.
interact with.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I had been assuming that there was going to be. I mean, Civilization, for example, religion and all. You know, it adds an extra layer or two when they add DLC. So I had expected this would just be more complex, and it is a little more complex, but not too.
You're right that it's more complex, but actually, I guess Carl is right that it's more complex, but because of the kind of game that Stellaris is, and there's so much parallel stuff going on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that it's probably not overwhelming.
A lot
like
of
it is
the
in Civ.
the paid bits are actually the interesting story and breadth to the game.
They
Well, I don't know. I
it
mean,
solves some
Horizon
problems.
Signal is free, right?
Yeah, like resource dumps
Yes.
for the curators.
Yeah, the
That's
curators and
very helpful.
having places to dump your energy and minerals.
Oh, yeah.
when
Yeah.
you've got a surplus is good. Anyway, I want to thank each of you. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Josiah. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Blake. Thank you, me. If you want to listen, if you want to ask us some questions, we've got email frontseatquestions@gmail.com. We'll answer them at some point. We're kind of slow on it. Our Twitter is @frontseatcast. Our Facebook page, facebook.com/frontseatcast. frontseatgamer.wordpress.com is our WordPress site. Sometimes we get comments on there. And we've got a YouTube channel now with our own URL, youtube.com/frontseatcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you guys for coming in. And thank you for developing Stellaris. That was Paradox?
Yep, Paradox.
and
Yeah.
Interactive.
Thank you, Paradox. All right, bye. Everyone ready?
Stellaris
Feel
Special
free to
Edition.
take a sip of water if you feel parched or anything. Try not to like do exactly what Blake's doing. That's perfect. What we want is just slurping.
Maximum
This is
slurp.
just an episode about slurping.
We need a slurp baseline from every.
Yeah, it's
every
like
person.
white correcting with sound, except
Should we use slurps around here? Some people do a clap in the middle, but I prefer if everyone just gave a good slurp.
Then you get to do your S hissing as well,
Oh right, yeah.
do it.
Sibilance.
Siblings. Sally Sats. All right, ready? Everyone good? Good.
Yes.